like in the beginning of any kind of a worker compensation case, if you get hurt on the job, you are going to be entitled to certain things under the statute automatically, or you should be automatically entitled to certain things under the statute. One would be medical treatment right away. So if you get hurt and you need to report it to your employer immediately, that's a key, because if you don't, there can be, if a certain amount of time goes by, you can actually be hurt by the fact you didn't report it in time. So you need to report it to your employer right away. That employer should, at that point, send you for a medical evaluation. That does not always happen. If that doesn't happen, obviously that's a time where you need to seek representation to try to make sure that that's getting taken care of. If the employer does send you for medical treatment, you go, you get that medical treatment. That treatment can vary wildly depending upon what the injury is, where you were sent. The employer does have the right to control that medical treatment, but if they don't send you automatically or they deny you medical treatment, you do have the opportunity to go then on your own, seek your treatment, and we can maybe get it reimbursed at a later date when we would get involved. So you got medical treatment benefits. So you are either, if you go to see the doctor and the doctor takes you and puts you on a medical restriction, says, you've got a lifting restriction, or you can only use one arm, or depending on what your injury is, that there would be a physical restriction. If your employer cannot accommodate that restriction, in other words, they don't have any work that would allow you to work one-handed per se, then at that point, you'd be entitled to stay home and draw your workers' compensation benefit check, which is what's called temporary and total disability. So you're entitled to temporary total disability if your employer can't accommodate your restrictions, or if you have a serious enough injury where the doctor was to take you off work altogether. So if you've had a surgical procedure and the doctor says, hey, look, you cannot go back to work at all, you're entitled to what's called temporary and total disability after a period of waiting. So you got the medical treatment, then you've got benefits for payment, either light duty benefits or temporary total disability benefits. Then at some point in time, you're going to be done with your treatment, or at least the doctors that you're being sent to are going to say you're done with your medical treatment. You're going to be placed at what's called maximum medical improvement. When you reach maximum medical improvement, you're probably going to be left with some ongoing lingering effects from your injury. That's where we would be working to get you what's called permanent partial disability or permanent total disability, depending on the severity of what you've got ongoing. Permanent partial disability is just that. It's permanent, but it's partial. You can still work, you can still function, but you have limitations, stuff that's different about what you can do that before you got hurt. So let's say it's a shoulder injury, for instance. You may have limitation in your ability to reach overhead, to work overhead, to reach behind you, to do any kind of lifting either out in front or overhead. Those are things which then translate into what's called permanent partial disability under the workers' compensation statute. That can vary wildly based upon what maybe the employer insurer would want to pay you versus what the insurance company would want to pay you versus what you would really be entitled to if you got representation and went and tried to either get an independent medical exam on your own or just had a lawyer that was then representing you in trying to get you the adequate amount of disability associated with whatever the injury was. So that's permanent partial disability. Then you've got permanent total disability, which is just as it sounds, it's permanent, but it's total. You are not able to access the open labor market at all any longer. And that is a totally different amount of settlement versus trial, and there's all kinds of different stuff that can go on into that as far as a weekly check versus a lump sum back to a present value. Definitely would need representation to try to get anything associated with a permanent disability like a permanent total disability claim.